Welcome to the Amazing Spider-Man series, where we go over every Spider-Man comic from start to finish. We'll be going over Amazing Spider-Man 2. Let's get started. So again, we have two different stories in this one comic, with the villains both being the Vulture and the Tinkerer. Duel to the death with the Vulture. The Vulture makes his appearance, where he is said to have been terrorizing New York for the last couple days. He is said to be extremely silent and fast. Now Magazines, ran by J. Jonah Jameson, also makes its first appearance, where they are seen discussing how hard it is to get a photo of the Vulture. We switch to a scene in the lab with Peter Parker and a bunch of other teens talking about how the magazine would pay a fortune for a photo of the Vulture. This is where Peter realizes he can catch good photos and make good money. Peter is given the magazine by Moose, a bully, and he reads and wonders about the possibility of finally making good money. When he gets home, his Aunt May gives him his Uncle Ben's miniature camera, mentioning how he would have wanted him to have it. He goes and changes into his Spider-Man gear in his room, and he tries to figure out a way on how to attach the camera onto his suit. Meanwhile, the Vulture is in his hideout, and he realizes that a jewelry company is transporting millions in jewelry across town. He claims to have a way to steal them, even though the attack will be expected. He said how not even Spider-Man will see it coming. As the Vulture flies out of his hideout, which is an abandoned silo in Staten Island, he makes his way to Manhattan. We see Spider-Man messing around with the camera atop of an apartment building, where he sees something flying around real fast, and he notices that there's no noise or anything. It happens to be Vulture that flies by without him noticing Spider-Man. Now the Vulture leaves a message to a couple places. The ones that we see are the J. Jonah Jameson Publishing Company, a radio network, and the chief of police, and the message says how he will steal all the diamonds from right under their noses. Pretty much a threat. Spider-Man sees Vulture and is getting closer to get a good pic. However, he kicks a loose brick and Vulture hears. As Spider-Man gets close, he can't see the Vulture anymore, only to get kicked by the Vulture behind his head. As Spider-Man is knocked out, Vulture drops him into a water tower, where he's seemingly drowned and won't find a way out. Real quick, I know these comics were meant for a younger audience, but Jesus Christ, dropping a body into a silo, that's pretty fucking evil. Now that Vulture thinks he got rid of Spider-Man, he moves on to step 2 of his plan. Meanwhile, Spider-Man wakes up at the sudden touch of cold water. He tries to web his way out, but he forgot to refill his web since his last fight with Chameleon. He tries to climb, but the walls are too wet and slimy for him. He realizes that he can just swim to the bottom and just sort of push his way out, like push his way up and out of the water and out of the tank. So Spider-Man gets out of the tank and he finds his camera as well, and he makes his way home and thinks about how he could sell the pictures to J. Jonah Jameson without giving away his identity. We then see him mentioning how when he first designed his Spider-Man costume, it was meant to appeal the entertainment world, but now he needs it for crime fighting, so he makes more web fluid cartridges and puts a belt under his costume to where he could fit a camera with the money that he's going to make from selling the pictures. He also mentions how he has a hunch on how the Vulture was able to fly, and is making a small device that will help him. After long hours of working on this little gadget, Spider-Man mentions how he doesn't know if it'll work until he needs it, but he needs to get some sleep as he's really tired. The next day, he makes his way to J. Jonah Jameson's office and sells the photos of the Vulture. J. Jonah Jameson asks him how he was able to get the photos, but Peter mentions how he will sell the pics under the condition that he never asks that question again. Peter also says that he doesn't want his name to be credited for the pictures. J. Jonah Jameson mentions how if he can get a picture of Spider-Man, he will pay a lot of money. We then cut to the next day at school, where everyone is eager to see the diamonds being transported in order to see the Vulture. Everyone is watching the transport occur. Peter mentions how there's cops on the roofs and an armed chopper flying as well. However, he leaves in case he needs to be changed into Spider-Man, to which the other teens call him out for being a chicken. We then see them unloading the diamonds, laughing about how the Vulture won't attack with all this security. As they unload the diamonds, the Vulture appears from below and steals them. Then he flies away into the sewer, and he gets away to the other side of town and makes his way out through a subway. We then see Peter changing into his Spider-Man costume at home, mentioning how the Vulture will be able to trick everybody. However, he also mentions how if he can get a good picture of him, he will make a fortune. We see Spider-Man climbing up a wall and mentions how that's his favorite part of being Spider-Man, being able to climb up walls. He then senses the Vulture nearby and spots a Vulture, and he swings towards him. But the Vulture looks behind him to make sure cops aren't chasing him. However, he sees Spider-Man, and he mentions how he should get rid of him for good, so he quickly loops behind Spider-Man. However, Spidey senses him behind him and he's able to dodge the attack, but still Vulture hit him with his wing off of the roof. He's able to web Vulture's leg and make his way up to grab the Vulture, and he tests the device to see if it works, and oh and behold, it works. They both are now falling. Spider-Man saves himself by just sticking to a wall. He lets Vulture fall down, and when he lands, he isn't able to fly, and the only reason he survives is because the wings broke his fall. The cops land and make their way to Vulture, capturing him. Meanwhile, Spider-Man is capturing a picture of the arrest. Peter says how he was able to fly due to magnets. However, Peter was able to make an anti-magnet gadget to stop it. So Peter goes to J. Jonah Jameson and sells the pictures, to which J. Jonah Jameson pays him great money. He tells him to spend it on music records or whatever, to which Peter is glad to see the fact that J. Jonah Jameson sees him as a typical teen. When he gets home to his Aunt May, he mentions how he paid rent for the rest of the year and how he will buy Aunt May new kitchen appliances. We then cut to the Vulture in a jail cell, mentioning how he will escape and make a new form of flying, to which Peter won't even be able to stop. The uncanny threat, the terrible tinkerer. So this story starts off with Peter at a science lab in Midtown High. While he is being talked about behind his back, he is introduced to Dr. Caldwell, to which he was recommended to by his science teacher to help with some labs. However, he is asked to pick up a radio before arriving to the lab for Dr. Caldwell. We cut to the next day when Peter is about to leave for the lab. However, he mentions how he needs to wear his Spider-Man costume, as he feels naked without it. He arrives to the place where he's supposed to pick up the radio and sees that it's called the Tinkerer's Repair Shop. So Peter is greeted by the Tinkerer when he arrives, and mentions how he is there to pick up Dr. Caldwell's radio. As Pete observes the Tinkerer, he sees how the Tinkerer seems like someone from a Grimm's fairy tale. Which, if you don't know, this is where most of the original Disney classic kids movies are based off of. You know, Peter Pan, Snow White, Cinderella, and so on. However, they have a dark twist to them. I would recommend them. They're pretty fun to read or listen to. Peter's spidey sense goes off. However, he mentions how he shouldn't be so paranoid. The Tinkerer goes to his basement, and it happens to be soundproof. There are some aliens down there working on a radio. They mention a secret plan where they have been secretly altering their special clients' orders. The repaired radio ended up being only a dime, to which Tinkerer chalks it up to giving bargains. As Peter gets to work, he can't shake off the Tinkerer. He keeps thinking about him, as his spidey senses kept going off, and they actually went off, and it was the same impulses that he felt over at the Tinker's shop. Soon, Dr. Caldwell needs to leave to give a lecture, and Peter sees it as his chance to investigate the radio. So Peter discovers a little device making the frequency and decides to go back to Tinker's shop. So Spidey breaks in and finds his way to the basement. The door happens to be wide open, so we see a room with the whole operation taking place. There's a bunch of aliens there. They mention how the device on the radios are spy devices to which important Earthlings have. They mention how it's almost time for an attack on Earth. So Peter sees that the aliens' plans are to learn about Earth's military and scientific advances. However, his spidey senses goes off and he dodges a shot from an alien ray gun thing. He goes into the secret room, to which everybody sees him, and they have trouble stopping him, of course, as he's Spider-Man. And as Spidey is crawling on the wall, he's actually knocked down, and the aliens jump him due to having sheer numbers, but Spidey easily shakes them off. The Tinker shoots him with the ray, and it stuns Spider-Man, and he mentions how the weapon could kill any ordinary human. However, Spider-Man is only stunned, which is impressive. They put him in a glass cage, to which they claim no one can ever escape. They need to dispose of Spider-Man, as he knows their personal plan, so they release the oxygen from the cage, creating a vacuum. So as Spider-Man is thinking of a way out, he sees a bunch of tiny holes which are supposed to suck the air out. But Spidey uses them to shoot the web onto the control panel and open up the cage. We see this awesome graphic showing the inner workings of Spidey's web shooters. When Spidey breaks free, he punches a couple of aliens, and one of them accidentally shoots the control panel with the ray gun thingy, and it foils their plan. The aliens leave as the place is on fire, and Spidey goes after the Tinkerer. As Spidey is trying to get the Tinkerer out of the basement as it's on fire, the Tinkerer is trying to break himself free from Spider-Man, avoiding his grasp. Eventually, Spider-Man leaves as the building was burning too fast, and he just left the Tinkerer. And as he swings away, people see him swinging away, mentioning how it could have been Spider-Man who started the fire. A spacecraft appears above the aliens, and they escape, and they push a little self-destruct button, destroying all the spy devices on Earth. They mention how they will never return. Spider-Man's back in the lab, as he fixed the radio, to which Dr. Caldwell walks in all excited. He mentions how he saw something incredible. He mentions how he saw a spaceship. However, he chalks it up to his imagination, as nobody would ever believe him. Spider-Man managed to yank the Tinker's mask off at the last second, which means that it was probably an alien as well. So some of the characters we were introduced to were Vulture, of course, who is now in prison, and we'll probably see him later on. The Tinker, who managed to escape, and we might see him later on, who knows. This was an action-packed issue with more drama as to how Spidey keeps being seen as a menace. Thanks for watching. See you guys next week.